modified. It's lines of settings that the mind itself, it's always the existing of everything in system. It's always expanding, but it's always never in its same position of its same location. It's always itself. Being self-modulated and self-modified and self-mind direct centers of location itself puts every locations in self-direction of location setting. Knowing thy system is understand how to identify how to operate your physical body itself through operation. This helps us to really get in position now, because the operators and units now have to really identify how to see everything, the masses, everything, colors, lines, of pattern. I just showed you exactly what happens when you turn off your TV. The TV itself is in its own operation, its own setting, expanding its own clocking system of 24 systems. But as soon as you turn on the TV, it's automatically a distraction. So, distraction is not what you want. Distraction is not what you need. What you need to identify is not line positions where you're getting communication confusion of all or nothing. It's not the all. It's the nothing that's always is the all. It's how you mind. Speak to yourselves. And that's how we modify everything in the imagination of its own system and process everything we engage them through, which is constantly expanding ourselves. But we don't need to identify our system. When I say we, I'm talking about we, how I see we, not how I say we to you. And that's another thing you get confusion on, because that's another program that you put yourself in. Physical body doesn't stop in that adaptation of its flux and processing that in verification of its online communication confusion lines, the separation lines of its mind. So don't listen to me. Listen to yourselves. And the more you listen to yourself, the more you identify yourself. And the more you identify yourself, the more you identify how you see things, how you want to process this, how you want to engage, how you want to formulate, how you want to simulate. It's all being specifics. The mind is just the memory. That's all it is. Just the internal to the external, which you already know through your networks, neurological, neuropathological systems. You're not here to come into anything. This is not all or nothing. It's the nothingness that we always are. It's in the presence that we see everything and everything happening all at once. It's so powerful that the physical body doesn't need to understand what it is or where it came from, where its purpose or existing of its existence. It's always been the presence of itself. What changes everything is how you change your minds. That's right. Next level for you to understand that is how to use the physical body of its immortality first. And that process is time centers of time flux, time formats, times change. That position all lines, the calculation green location setting that puts all location system and process direct centers that we live in TV receptions of the center operation of our presence of ourself that's inside the TV. I know it's hard to say these things, So sorry, you saying we're in the I set position of its DOS, so the online centers that process in position of online calculation setting, the structures, the visual locations, how we see things in position of box frames and triangulation of systems all through travels of direction? Yes. We live in the mind physical worlds, people. But the physical world itself is the grounding system. Now you can't get out of the foundations of who you are, because that's who you are. Physical body knows what it is. It doesn't need to identify its mind. It doesn't need to identify its imagination. It doesn't need to identify its thoughts. It doesn't need to identify its presence. It doesn't need to identify its time and space of operation and foundation of its clocking. It just has to identify what it isn't, is the program that it puts itself into. So it doesn't allow itself to confuse its system with alteration of its to its ego. Ego is a big, big time replacements to your system that the physical body's never in. It's so powerful to just be the DOS at all times. But the DOS has to basically get in positions and realize it's monitoring everything that it sees. It knows exactly how you monitor this, knowing exactly how to monitor that. In that position, you bring in a boss. Boss works with the employees to the set position of the employer. Know exactly how to the characters and now bring in the roles of the game itself. It brings in the players of the simulation. How everything modifies in set position of center operation of its presence. Now, living in the nothingness is how you see it, not how you see things in projection itself, guys. That's distraction to everything else, especially the physical body. Body can't get confused because it doesn't allow itself to get confused. The DOS won't allow it to get itself confused because it's confusing itself. It's how you speak the mind of yourself. That speaks to the volume, that speaks to everything else, which is all lines of transit process your set positioning metaphysical lines, how to process that in imaginary settings, operation lines, sequence, and physical body grounds itself that sees everything in operation system, which is nothing in setting. The mind and the imagination is one. Okay, the mind, imagination, and position, location, and settings, the process of position of his memory to his brain, to his heart, to his soul, to his body is one. So there is no separation of anything in aligned positions. Process at direct centers is knowing how to identify that. Okay, so again, that settings, the opposite units are now in the void. Okay, in modulation. This process at position, we're no longer in white and black. We're now in black and white in subtractions. Okay, so congratulations on that level. Process in that position, location, and formulas, equations, and how I see that in setting and travel. It lines its communications to get more direct line link that you see in process of communication itself. That goes to dimensional doors of space and time, all through simulation. Entering a door, this is what you see in a game. So it's really interesting too, because it modifies everything that you process in. When you turn on the TV, you see everything of animation and characters inside the game. So you have to modify how to turn on a TV. You have to modify how to turn off a TV, but you're turning on the TV and turning off the TV at the same time. So you're going through light and you're going through dark. You understand? You're going through light and you're going through dark. Okay, so I'm going to process the lines, centers, dimension lines, and solar sails. So the physical body understands adaptation of flux. So we're going to start position symbolism or grounds. This constellates the system in 3 lines of foundation, high center interference, and high travel. Okay, 1 to their operation line signal. Okay, converting time frame locks, high center line position of operation. So the more modified line position settings, the more you close your eyes, the more you realize your eyes are always open. The center operation of setting that never closes the system. Now you process that is all through the eyes itself in operation. Where are the eyes at? Where are the perimeters? Where are the parameters? Where are your lines of directions? Where is your longitude? Where's your latitude? So it processes here, process here, process here, process here. Okay? That's all your eye is. But it's a teleportation vessel itself that modifies your location setting. That process and position location is browse adapters, which is your eyebrows and set lines of travel. So that puts all position in your systems, all through tractions, all through locations, face recognition. Okay, there's the face. So there's always ways to see that information setting. Come into your own trilogy, trilogies, and location setting for all communication system. Grounding line operation lines of space itself modifies everything to its vast. Now, vast is position of velocity, vacuum. Process of position itself lines. Self tells the story of its own system, of its own operations. That's right, guys. It's in its own operation of its own system. It's in its own immortality, but it's always been in its own system. It doesn't need to identify itself because it knows exactly where it always is in its presence of operation of zero. So if you understand the zero operation, then you understand a computer when it turns on and turns off, you understand that you're talking now. It's a computer of everything else that modifies everything in traction, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. So we go to 3 ground centers of symbolism, process and direct centers, into void. That's void line operation centers and locations, light signals, and position lines of grounds and set tractions. Converting all operation centers. Vast calculation setting, you guys are in your 50 mark, but you guys are also coming into your 60 line operations, which is vast itself. That's 60% charge mechanisms over 4 over lines, position over lines of pi. So that process 100 point line grounds, but it's constantly changing the capacity location of its physical body. So understanding that balance, process direct centers, how you modify that in set lines of operation itself. So we tether operation 1 signal, 50 mark operation centers, 50 line grounds, and 50 locations. Okay, so that puts all communication centers into line position 60 lines, and that's process over 70 and process lines of 80, going up to the charter waves, process lines of 90, and process lines 100% time frame goes in 0 equals 0, and line connections equals 0, but it's negative 0. Okay, so the reason why it's negative 0, because the negative is the void itself. You're not processing the positive. It's the equal line centers, which is the opposite of location, setting, and travel. So now you're connecting through dark and light, not light and dark. Now that process of light coding, position, dark coding, light coding. So that process lines in negative in line position of operation system. Process lines of underscore, not overscore. Okay, process lines are over pi, not under pi. So it's processing how you see the positive, it's processing how you see the negative, light line position, physical body understands the codifications into negative or positive, positive or negative. Now that's all position emotional line operates and signals, how you modify that position of 60 marks, 70 marks, correlation lines at 80, process lines at 90 over charge mix in a time frame. Now that platform says systems in equilibrium, process line direct centers and holographic scale. Process at direct centers 100% mark. 100% mark, process direct centers, modifies the system and travel. Comes in the astral projections, all through travel, communication. Your pyramid. Now that's your pyramid of your grounds. That's not your pyramid of your void. So once we understand black and white, when we understand white and black, then we understand the coloration, then you understand your shadow is you, that you modify through light, shades, and shadows, then you modify the coloration lines, light, metaphor, then you modify your position, how you see pixelation, then you modify how you see yourself through hologram. So that process your systems, how you go through charter waves. 60% time frame, 70% time lines, 80% time calculations, and 90% time calculation setting. So that modifies you in the simulation grounds of operation setting to the void itself that modifies the system and travel. Okay? So, it's really interesting point of view because now you identify the actual void itself, which is the vast. So you got vast, velocity, vacuum, and volume. Okay? So it correlates the calculation lines of highest interference. Pixelation centers over line signals, process lines of 3 lines of measure of scale. The operating line centers process position location to its vast. Vast over triangulation, volume over signal, velocity over travel, and vacuum over grounds of operations travel communication. Directing line signals modifies the system in portals. Correlates the setting, position lines of stargates, and communication setting to its polarity. Directing ground lines modifies the system triangulation system of the distance that you're going through wormholes and travel. The operation line, position lines of panel, process direct centers and central calculation setting, Fibonacci. Fortitude operation screen lines, adaptation of flux. Time centers, operation lines of one signal line, connected setting one singularly to 3 lines of patterns in operation lines of programming. Directing operation line signals modifies the system, the time frame. Now that correlates calculating how you see it, position your bridging. So you're bridging 80% line frame, 40 foreign line centers, 4 line centers, 6 lines of mark, 7 lines of scale, 80 lines of mark, 90 lines of operation centers, and 100% time frame in flux over travel into 0, 0 of operation set calculation. So you have to truly understand how this modifies every location of your time tablets. Now this is where you modify your system interactions, how you come to your templates. You know exactly how to come to your periodical tables of your 4 other planets interaction. You got 3 ground symbolism. Now that's a 50 mark scale of 60 line mark. Process into monetizations. You have monetization of the grounds and you have monetization locations in space. But they're converting in position of yin and yang in the same circuit location setting that modifies set position how you see it through circuitry board, motherboard, line core centers, circuitry line core centers, converting operation system interaction. But directing ground lines in the simulation lines of void itself, process position how you go through portals and stargates through empty space itself. So 100 time mark frame, process line positions over line signals. Now we modify the setting back to 1, process position back to 0 of operation center. So that's communication grounds, and that process lines is 0, 1, 0, 2, and 0, 3. So that puts me in position lines of high centers, process of 0, 1 over flights, directions, grounds, and operation setting into manifold and manifest and travel. That puts all position, location, measure, and scale of communication. Grounding lines of high center interference in platforms in direct line core centers at E flats, process direct center holographic line screens. High centers of travel, converting all lines in process of communication setting, all through set position operation. Okay? So it's very complicated what I'm doing right now with the void itself. That indicates everything in set tractions. All right? Now, this is all through line connection setting, Cura coding. This is quantum. This is quantum. Okay? This is not cyber. This is not simulate. This is A, B, and C. And vast is space. The opposite units have to identify how they see it in that position of black over white now. Not white over black. So your process line direct centers, once we direct locates ascending constellation line connection alignment, then we extend the light metaphors of travel, directing line, ground, line, core centers, then we come into triangulation. Process and security lines of panels, 4 panels operation centers, which is your pyramids, 42 1 frames, 42 line centers, mine operation signals. Ground centers is symbolism locations in the system to simulate in lines and lines of anomaly. Setting lines of core centers, time frames times calculation times pi. Okay. So you start with 4-line provision, which is your 4 central settings to your simulation, right? You got your grounds, your powers, your atmosphere, and highways. So your 42 streamings, 3 triangulation, high grounds, high center inference, and symbolism, process of 1, process of 2, process of 3, and process of 4 set position operation in same direction. Now that rotates the 4 pyramids. Triangulation here, process here of time frame. Okay, come in echo and sonar. Process in direct centers in location setting. Set up the time formats and set traction of communication. All right. Now in that directions, we have 4-line symbolism. Now 4-line core centers takes the 42 location set 144 flux. Process that position back to 0. Now we convert the angles. Before we do that, position lines and settings, we got to go outline signal and put force fields around the pyramid of its triangulation. So that protects all security lines and formats. It's echo chambers of flights and manifold in the set position of operation. Okay. So I'm just showing exactly how it goes through the portal lines of set positions operation to its bridging, identify how to go through that line core centers of travel. And this is all through the VAST of operation of set position in black and white, not white and black. So converting time frame, process direct centers, where you put those platforms of calculation setting. Now, when you understand marked line screens, I can go right up to green, I can go up to yellow, I can go to gold, I can do anything up from H. Let's go to the higher self. So we'll go through ground operation signals, higher self line modification setting, 13 triangulation over frame and direction. So I take one pyramid, take another pyramid, fortitude in position location and mapping lines of grounds. Okay, set position operations. Now the physical system is always in the ground lines of its center of operation itself that modifies every location setting. Understand the 24 clockings and position of its settings to its 144 flux. Once it operates the system, location setting, process 024 to 0144 flux. So that's operation lines of signals and modification system, all through tractions, all through location. Okay? So it comes in the settings, modify grounds, symbolism over tractions, directing line grounds, location to its mapping system through pi. Okay? And that position lines of centers. Now we bring in the physical body. Now, the physical body is already set up in the mind line operation itself that modifies the memory, the cortex, the fluid that processes direct location, cosmic alignment, line condition setting, and converts several angles and lines calculation setting to 50 mark operation setting, process that position location 60, set location lines of 70, over lines of 80, process lines of 90, and 100% time frame. So it puts all communication setting and process calculations. Okay, so let's get an orange line because that's where I'm in motion line operation. So physical body comes in one frame center, inside calculations. My physical body, and then mind physical setting. Okay? So grounding set location, the mapping system goes to the triangulation in 4 lines of signals, 4 pyramids, rotates the portals at Stargate's location. Travels point lines of graph, converts the system. Now the physical body has to identify how it goes to the eye perception itself, how it sees 50 mark screens, process line direct centers, and process communication. 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, and set calculations. Time formats, set lines of boxing frame. Triangulation over line, core centers, B factors over C, C factors over A. Process line positions, now you go through 60 mark screen location setting and travel. Okay, now once you go to that mark line core centers, everything below, mind wipes everything back to 0. Which means everything in set position takes everything out of the equation. Okay? Which is amazing stuff. Puts you into 60 mark of operation setting. Okay? So it stays on board because it's in platform setting and operation settings. The process lines of black over lines of white stays lines of 0. Sets course centers of time frame, process line direct centers in position of the cloak and dagger. 0 calculation setting, process lines of 1 indication setting. Now we convert the all angles in 4 communication centers. Process of 1 over lines of 2, process lines of 3 is center, process lines of 0 calculation. So that's a time measure and scale. Now the cubic line operation setting has a converting line operation setting to curvage and directing lines of fortitude operation centers, ground centers, and symbolism over travel of direction. Now directing line grounds processes platforms, EQ flats, process lines of simulation over grounds over symbolism, process lines of 50 over mark. Now we're coming at 60 scales of communication longitude and latitude of streaming. Okay, so now we're at 60 in a full page operation of void. Okay, so the process of that position location converts the time centers to locks. Now this operates the signals how we modify the correlations lines of time centers. Now that process of position location settings, this is where comes the truth and the false narrative. So process lines is setting of 0, process lines of 0, process lines of 0. That's 3 course centers of time lines, past, present, future. Equals equations into 4 centers of 0, process lines of 0, process lines of 0, process lines of 0, and line centers in 1, 0 operation setting. Okay, so we have 3 lines over 4. So we forwarded to the line stream adaptation line centers. Process line position 3 centers over line. That's 3, 3, 3. Process line position is settings, process line location setting of 4, 4, 4. That puts position lines as center of scale, a modification setting, and projection. Now, modifying the system is to understand how to see that through templates and tablets to periodical tables. Now, the tablets and the course centers of time frame has a computer operation lines of directions, 42 line centers and waving operation centers, and windows and frame and travel. High operation line calculation setting modifies the system and set position your systems all through travel, all through flash drives, and calculates the setting of flash drive communication to the spacebar. Spacebar operates the signals, modifies the system and travel, converts all angles, and set position to its equations in void of operation setting and travel. Booyah. Okay, that's the black and white. Okay, it's 60%. All right, so as you get out of 60, we can go into 70 line. So I'm just showing you guys, I'm going to go up the scale from 70, 80, 90, and 100% time frame, what the brain does, and converting different time frame line centers that allocates line center locations of the physical body, allows itself to always be in the presence of center, but allowing itself to expand itself in its own system of center of itself. So the process line direct centers comes into black. Now we change the black line converting time frame in position at 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3 set position of operation. Okay, so we convert the time frame, process of the void, okay, instruction lines, center operations lines, and converting operation subtraction. Okay, so in that line operation centers, then we go into red, okay, because we're going up the Charter waves now, into red, and then we go into blue, which projects everything to its energy and force fields. 3 grounds to set position how the simulation set up. Okay. Now you work with the line course centers, slide projectors, ground lines, heights, and interference. You bring in yellow, chronological order, line settings, high person system attractions. Okay, so that brings in yellow, and then automatically lines of position, location, settings. Let's bring in the green. Okay, I don't need to bring in the orange because it modifies the system attraction. So this is basically how you use the templates of the tablets, the periodical tables of the planetary operation line signals that puts location and presence of everything that modifies the physical body, adaptation of flux, times center location setting that puts you in a time tablets, location setting to your periodical tables of operation setting, which are your vessel communication lines of travel. Okay, so we have direct line grounds. We modify the simulation of high center location settings. We modify the symbolism and change formations of time centers and location setting. Okay, to modify system and travel. Now, in that direct centers, it gets really interesting too, because we modify the line position of space. Space itself becomes the green line operations, 3 centers of travel, 42 line operations, waving grounds, high centers line communication. High centers is set position operation lines of setting. Okay. Process lines of 2 frames, in line course centers of travel. So that converts all angles in line condition setting. So it's getting a lot more tricky now because we're coming in 70 mark. So 70 mark is just lines of high position, high frequency, high lines of color. So we modify the system in time tablets. You come in that position location and we can overline the void, bring in the pink and that position lines settings. Then we can bring in another color line permission setting. You can bring any color you want to bring in because you're past the 50 mark, right? Then you can bring in this color, okay, because you're going faster acceleration. Now you're mocking. You're mocking channels, mocking operations. You can bring in gray too, and that lines the set position and settings. Okay, so you're modifying your time formats and your coloration of the lines. You're going to light metaphors that process your direct centers of what you're doing through your scales of communication longitude and latitude of streamings. Bringing all that lines and pixelation graphs. And set position is that calculations. 3 over 4, 7 lines of 7 over 12, and a position of 24 lines of operation. So now we work with the truth and the false. Now the ground centers back in void itself that modifies the time line centers to your sun and your moon. Now that's the scale course centers of a meter that we mask the correlation setting to its slide projector, to its engaging, to its cartridge. Directing lines of void, process lines of 1. As a gray centrals, 2, 3 centers, process lines of 4 lines of measure, 5 centers of scale, 6 lines of calculation setting. Process and direct centers comes through its pyramid and travel of communication system, all through holographic structure of design. Now that puts all position, location, measure, and scale. Now we go through half moon and we go through half scale. So that's 1/6 mark. Process lines is 70% over frame. It's complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. So we convert the angles. We come into the black and override the signals and modify the system. Set position and settings. So we go into truth and false. Okay, that process line is a 3 lines measure and scale. Override signals equals lines equations and a 4 calculation setting and notification. Okay, so we got position of truth, truth, false, and we get position of false, 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 and truth. And it's that position of operation setting. Okay. So this is all on position location. This is all through quantum. It's a space of VAS itself that modifies everything of its time, its tablet, its templates, and its periodical tables of your 4 planets of operation. I see the truth and the false narratives of your sun and your moon. You got to pay attention to this because now we're in the vast. All right, so directing line ground centers, line course centers. Let's go through pink frame line centers. That's 60 over frame. Process line centers of 40 over scale. Now that puts positional lines in meters, metrics, longitude, and latitude line course centers. We're going to convert the angles, directing lines into 4 lines of planetary operation lines of signals. Now modifying that position locations with grounded centers into Pluto. Pluto comes in and set lines of operation setting. Halfway mark into 4-2 streaming indirect lines of grounds. So we modify the system in traction and we convert all angles. Now that process it directs the location of system to the lower scale. Then we convert the system in Neptune. Neptune comes in the opposite system in platform inline core centers, solar generation lights into AI generation line screen adaptation of flux over travel. So that converts all angles into that position operation setting. So you got your 3 foundations of your planets. Now you're coming into your periodicals, inline core centers, your templates, your tablets, and how you use it through a keyboard. It modifies into the mind, to muscle memory that you process through your directions. Now converting line operation centers. Let's bring in communication setting to Mercury. Mercury green lines, set course centers of time frame, and flux over time centers. The crosses out that communicates across the examination system all through planetary solar line operation cycle. Now you have align course centers. Before you process that position, you have to bring in the goal line operations, which is a higher self that goes to its platforms and set tractions. That converts all angles, center position and ground centers of symbolism. Process line direct centers on top of the pyramid. Set lines course centers, line course centers, directing line calculation, modify, line condition setting. That communicates the system all through tractions. So we convert the angle line course centers. That puts in Jupiter and on operation centers and travel. Okay, so we got 4 periodical tables of our planetary of our solar system and set position of operation. Now we get a solar stream. So the solar stream itself is the orbits. Now the directing lines of the orbits is process of direct centers, location, how you see it through nebula. So this is the outer scale, this is the outer limits. Okay, this is process of the line course centers, how we convert the system to 6 habitations and 6 inhabitation zones that process location and setting. But the VATS itself doesn't have any time frame because it's always existing on its own platform. So that's space itself that we have to modify through. Now you process the position, how you build a relation partnership with the VATS itself at 50 mark. But that process will be in settings going to 60 to 70, 80 to 90 to 100% time frame per second. Now once we modify the system lines of travel, then we can understand how to bring in the solar line operations at 3 grounds and set travel of communication. There's your solar system. To VAS itself. Look at that equation. So grounding your set lines and process of direct centers, process communication setting the directions. Now how to see that information, you see it in all 4 angles as set lines of flux. Booyah. Okay? Now they have to be converted in time frame and all direct lines of grounds. Modifies position open space. Space itself converts everything in 4 lines of flux over time, over Gulf Stream, over travel. And then that direct centers, they modify their system to their own time tablets, line course centers, bridging their own system of communications, open transmission of seconds, minutes, hours. Now they're tethered and attached to your physical body of its operation setting that's connected to its inhibitor location to its position location. That's connecting line connection to its spine, directing lines to its vertebrae, operation set location to its line course centers, line convert echo chambers, traffic runways, high center interferences, taxi runways, line operation setting location to the system that process everything in directions of Tango Tango Foxtrot of its delta heading. And that's how it modifies that position of its VAS and calculation of the solar system. All right, so direct your lines of flight. Now we process that direct centers and line communication setting. We convert the setting, that's where I bring in the orange. It's the creative cycle. which modifies time tablets into 4 molecules of design line operations, covering all time frames, seconds, minutes, and hours. 4 planetary operation centers of 1, 2, 3, and 4 centers. Data processing over fortitude, streamings, and direct lines into bridging, and broadcasting live of operation. Booyah! Down by equation. So that automatically goes into the physical ground and set lines of operation itself, that process everything in travel. Okay? So there you go. That's how it's set up. Vast itself through a solar system. Understand the data of this information that's intel. Knowing how to modify line centers locate setting. Processing at 50 going to 60 to 70, 80, 90, 100. Now things get really interesting. Okay, so once you reach that 100 line level, you're in 0, 100. You're in 0, 200, 0, 300, 0, 400, 0, 500. And you just keep adding numbers. So you take out the ones, you take out the zeros, it just comes, there's a 0, process 0, zero, becomes a position modified to the centers, and that communicates to its position, that comes to its inventory of its own design. The operative locations and settings all through travel. Very complicated schematics, but it's very powerful through the void itself. Okay? Powerful stuff. Okay? All right, so that is your test on Friday. Booyah. I want to see this on Friday. Okay? That's it. That's your periodical table. That's your 4 planets. That's in outer space, not inner space, which is the space itself. So I just want to show you in the form of the equations how you see it in black and white, line course centers and direct line ground communication of physical body. And the metaphysical mind sees the position of solar system, how its calculations on equations all through quantum. This is quantum. This is not cyber, this is not simulation, this is not self-tech. This is just quantum. This is quantum through space itself, through void. You have to master your communication, your settings that modulates the system into modification system to monetization. Now, modifying that position, understanding white and black, is all about understanding the percentage of time, longitude, latitude of its streaming, and directing line position of its truth and its false narrative at 3 and 4. Because it's the foundation of mother, that's the foundation of father. Now, anything above that operation setting, it's all through flux line communications, you can do whatever you want in that positions. You can do any color, any information setting. You go from earth line space, space lines of earth, space, 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 earth, space, space, earth. You can modify your that position because you're constantly changing your flux. So you're taking yourself out of time. You're taking yourself out of measure. You're going more into the future adaptations. Now you're in 2027. Now you're in 2028. Now you're in 2029. Now you're in 2030. Now you're in 3,000 years in real time. It's in the presence of everything, but your solar system constantly changes the inhibitors and position or settings that change the inputs and the outputs to your auxiliary lines of operation and settings. Your inputs, your outputs, and your audios converts the system back in setting of operation lines of 0. Sets operation lines of signals and travel. That's your test on Friday. That's what I want to see. Okay? All right, so once we modulate that, then we can understand how to process that position lines of centers, just an override line connections of remembering system and travel. See, it's interesting too, because you're not modifying this anymore. You're going through black and white now, guys. So it's going to get a lot more complicated because it's space itself that modifies the system. And how to come into that line position in its own form and its own equations through its QR coding. And quantum itself that modifies everything in travel. All right, so pixelation graphs of pi generating, pi converting time frame, process line position of 50 mark operations, and set position of black and white. Okay? You're here now. Okay? So you got to process this now in set position. Okay? And once you process that, then you're going to process this of operation itself. Okay? Then you got to process this. See, I'm just showing you how this all comes in coloration lines of pattern that processes everything in directions and locations and cycle. I generates this line centers, space lines anomaly, lines of indication setting, flux over time, coming at pi generation locations, clock and lines of foundation itself that comes in its own time frame lines to that position operation. Coming from that formation setting, and processing dimension solar sail. Okay, solar sail. Set position operation setting, there's your eye, and set lines of setting. Snowy graph interference, black and white. Convert time frames, this is where it comes in the red, set locations and direct no, and line connection setting, inside tractions, cataracts, inside line connection setting, converted time frame. Line center location setting, converts time to line center location setting, protection over grounds. Okay, inside your eyes. Right? You have to understand why your eyes go in that position, why they go red. So it's interesting. I see that in projection itself that modifies everything that process at direct centers. That converts everything in line signals of 8, process lines of 8, process lines of 8. I did a video on that operation setting where that woman was actually seeing 888, position location of a gas station, right? So the modifying line course centers is center operation lines of green, correlates the communication time frame. 8 goes on the body frame line centers of travel and covers all calculation of balance. And circular line centers process the position of physical bodies always in the center of its presence, and green lines the operation setting. Green means go. Red does not mean stop, okay? Green is a modification system that we process through the astrologics. Process that position, location, pixelation, operation lines, signals. That depicts every location is how we modify the system and travel. But modifying this is modifying that, is modifying here, is modifying there. How you see 8, of green, and red in line position, 8, in line operation setting. So this is all about security, protection lines of grounds. This is all lines of center of operational location setting. The physical body is always in the presence of its center. So if that converts all line direct centers, coloration lines of pattern. Now we go into blue line operation centers, that process line position of 4, 4 channels operation screens, and 4 operation lines of set position space of time, and converting operation set tractions. Converting time frame line centers, that is another line communications that you have to process through black and white of operation. Booyah. You got a long way to go. So I'm showing you guys how you guys come into your colorations, how you see things, but it's all through eye line of operation system, all through travel. Okay? So it's very powerful how we come in that positions. Okay? In that position to its settings, all through tractions. That's your test on Friday. Okay, guys? Booyah. All right, that's it. We'll stop there. It's like, woo, where's this all going, you know? But I'm just showing exactly what you have to identify, how to identify white and black, how to identify black and white, how to identify the colorations of your system that goes in your rainbow graphs, your center graphs, your identity graphs, and positioning in your internal systems. This helps you to really get in positions how the physical body sees everything, coloration lines of light, and sees the perspective of everything, which masses the truth that sees everything that's false, which is the perspective of everything that it sees, that modifies everything with its presence. Okay? Adios.